Hello and welcome to Pardon the Interception, Season 32, Week 1, with your hosts, me, Lee Wood.
You got me,
Me,
Conrad Williams.
and me, Nick Taylor, who you can hopefully hear this time.
We have definitely turned up the volume on Nick's mic, and now he is louder than he is in person.
Indeed.
So, an interesting week one all round. Week 1 is usually a interesting week at the best of times, and I think I can speak for all of us here that I say hopefully that Richard John is feeling slightly better after a unexpected hospitalisation caused a little bit of delay in the kickoff for the season. And with that, let's take a look at what happened in the GFL this past week. Conrad being the only coach here that's coached in the GFL. What can you tell us about what happened in this previous week?
Yeah, well, I'll start by echoing you, Coach Lee, in the we're sending all our best wishes in RJ's direction. I hope he's well. I think, yeah, in terms of week 1, the season is full of possibility. Everything seems possible until that first ball is kicked off, and you're hoping that you can produce a good performance to get your team rolling. Some teams did so, of course, and others did not. The did nots will definitely include our friends, the La Mesa Lightning. Poor old Coach Sherrington got absolutely trounced by the Goats 58-0. Completely crushed, and he'll be wondering how he managed to set a team record for punts with 18 punts. So it can only go up from there. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the league, I did quite like the performance of the Hurghada Hulk, who racked up 50 via their quarterback Mo Iraz, who Coach Wood will enjoy because he's got his favorite stat line of 30 quickness, 20 strength, 50 technique. I'm sure you'll like that one, Lee.
That is definitely my preferred quarterback stat line. I am a big fan of the Barros QST, as I tend
the
to
Barros
call it.
QST. He delivered an impressive 122 quarterback rating in that game, en route to scoring plenty of touchdowns. And yeah, fantastic performance from him. Elsewhere, who else can we talk about? Let's have a quick look at the Quake, who again delivered an extraordinary number of points. The California Quake scoring 62 on the Washington Hawks. A shout out probably goes there to the running back Kinnard, who managed to get into the end zone 8 times, which is pretty extraordinary. He's one of those elite 60 quickness running backs, so very good on the outside. And clearly the Washington Hawks, poor old Coach Tuck, did not have any answers, and it just proceeded to land 8 touchdowns on them. Other teams that I'd like to give a little shout out to, Tuscany Raiders look great in their first match, despite the fact that the Tuscany Raiders conceded 4 turnovers and only had sort of 1 takeaway. So they were 4-1 down in the turnover ratio. They still convincingly beat the Texas Armadillos. That en route to that 35-9 win. You can't really argue with that when you've had so many turnovers. They still managed to get it done. Really excellent stifling defense there. And
I like to see the older play up of the fact that Tim Collier and Jays are in fact exactly the same person.
Yeah. So as seen at any live draft for anyone who's attended. I guess the last one I'd really like to talk a little bit more about is one of the close games, the Dodgers v the Blaze, Fair Isle Dodgers, Baltimore Blaze. My man, one of the guys here played for Aarhus, and of course I like to talk up Aarhus players having coached them in college. But unfortunately, he never actually started a game for Aarhus, and you can see why here with his quarterback rating of 36. His dubious QSTs were not getting it done, throwing 3 interceptions to only 1 touchdown. Basically, it was a kind of a challenge of who could produce the worst performance in order to sort of stumble over the line. The Blazers' rushing attack didn't quite seem to get it going. Despite the 53 carries they racked up between the 2 different running backs, they just couldn't seem to push it through into the end zone often enough. I noticed that even more unfortunately, the Blaze went for it on 4th down, and rather than just trying to nudge that extra few inches via one of their 2 running backs, they went for the quick pass, and that was pretty ugly. That resulted in an incomplete. So one way or another, Fair Isle did get it done in overtime, but they'll be wondering how they can do generate a bit better passing out of arm next time round. Yeah, that's a quick canter around the GFL. I think I can leave it there for now.
Okay. Nick, anything further to add?
The only thing I saw was the Mustangs beating the Mules. Mules had a good season last season. I thought that was a quite a good result there for the Mustangs.
Seeing Mr. Bate at the Mules as opposed to the Blaze is slightly confusing to me. I think he's actually been away from the Blaze for a few seasons now, but he's still cemented in my head as being the coach of the Blaze.
Yeah, I agree with Nick. The Blaze, the Mules had a pretty good season last season, whereas the Mustangs have been a bit up and down. They have some good, some bad, and it kind of alternates. So interesting to see whether that's a statement of intent there, and the Mustangs are going to go on to try for that division title.
Yeah, indeed.
Let's move and have a look at the GFLA. So this is a league that obviously all three of us compete in, and my first competitive game in this for about 8 seasons, I think. Very happy with my particular performance here, especially against a rival. The warning signs to me is seeing the Bath Snow Bears putting up a very large amount of points, given that they were the Atlantic Bowl losing team last year, and Fire Swamp I think had a good outing as well, but I cannot read them. Yes, they had a much closer game versus the Sandhurst Generals. However, I think the Sandhurst Generals this year are a team that can compete and push for a very deep playoff run. I don't think the Aztec are pushing for as deep as either of those three teams are.
Yeah, I mean, presumptive favourites, right? The Snow Bears are obviously tipped to go far and possibly to the conference championship game. Coach Elkins has been talking them down a bit recently, but 56 points is nothing to sniff at there. I actually really like the game between the Sharks and the Stampede because both of these coaches were probably coming out thinking they want to go far in the CFC. And it was a close game at the Stampede's place. It was the classic kind of pass v run. One side very much selling out for lots of pass, one side selling out for lots of run. No surprise to find that's the Stampede, but they're putting it on each other, and it was close. It was a close game.
Yeah, I agree. The Sharks Stampede game was definitely the game I was looking out for to see who took that one. Very close. I was a little bit surprised to see the Stampede win it, but that's just Coach Cooper. I think every season starts off fairly well. Always a strong team, always tough to beat. There are a few other interesting games this week. Nighthawks pipping the Razorbacks in your new new division.
My new old league in the
yes.
far superior MFC,
where the Nighthawks pipped the Razorbacks in a close game, and that I believe that decided the division last season. The Razorbacks just pipped the Nighthawks last season, so that was an interesting one to see.
Yeah, known for being a perennially competitive division, that one. So you always feel like anyone has got a shout in amongst the Nighthawks, Razorbacks, Bears, and now of course Mariners. So we can see how that all shakes out.
Yeah, indeed.
Going to be a very interesting division for anyone that read the piece of fluff that I did based off the season preview. Supposedly I'm going to cakewalk that division, but I don't think that's going to be true.
Those training camp reports are always interesting. It's amazing how little things can make a difference between 3 and 4 and 5 stars on your little ratings. But
I ran it for the Delta last year, and it did correctly predict the bowl, including the winner of the bowl as well. So that's a sample size of 1, so it could have been luck. But I've done it for the Delta and for the Atlantic this year, so we'll see how well that pans out. Because the one thing it can't take into account is how well teams coach and injuries as well.
Yeah, shout out to my left tackle who broke his head open for an F class in week 1. I thought actually that one of the other games that I really liked in the Atlantic was where the Warriors totally robbed the Kings by the 10-point victory. If you look at the actual stat line underneath that, you'll see that Glenbrook basically conspired to lose themselves the game by turning the ball over 4 times. And the Warriors didn't really put up much in the way of yardage. They, admittedly the 93 rushing yards is more impressive than Glenbrook's 15, but the Kings will be kicking themselves that -3 turnover differential basically let it slip away from them.
Is it one of the risks of running a pass-first offense, though, especially with lower experienced players and against better secondaries, as you can put a large number of turnovers up?
I think the Warriors have a pretty decent defense as well, so it's not hugely unexpected from that perspective. I guess most of us would have thought the Kings would win this one, but the Warriors were pretty good on defense last season, only conceding 198 points last season. So you'd expect them to put up a good fight most weeks.
I was expecting here to see, with the MVP going to a cornerback, I was expecting to see a showman attribute here, which he has not got any at all.
Nah, he just picked him off twice, right?
So yeah, I was expecting either a showman or the bullhawk, something to increase that interception percentage.
But yeah, green shoots and good signs for Coach Marsh at the Warriors, I think, and hope that they can actually go on and from here and start to revive that what was once a storied franchise and utterly dominant at one stage of Atlantic history. So we'll see where it goes from here.
Anything else on the Atlantic?
My only other thought was the Sonics had a good outing against the Blues. They both finished on the same record last season, and that's a little bit of a statement in the first week to beat your nearest rivals fairly convincingly.
Yeah, ruthless.
So that'll be one worth watching.
They gave very little away there, particularly on the defensive side. The Sonics renowned for their good defenses, and particularly their strong front seven and absolutely brutal defensive lines in the past. So they just didn't give the Blues a look in this one.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on and look at the Big Sky. Nick, where would you like to start with this?
The Big Sky, it looked like a fairly pretty much what you'd expect from the Big Sky in week 1. A lot of the teams you'd expect to win and did win. One of the games I did pick out was the Titans versus the Bay Packers. Titans won their division last season, but I think I've got it. Yep. And the Bay Packers managed to put together enough points to pip the Titans in the Titans' home stadium. So that's an interesting dynamic to keep an eye on for this season. I think it's they've put up good numbers there. Both teams are good teams. The Titans had a very few first downs by the looks of things, which is I don't know whether they should be worried or not. It could just be that's how they play. Sometimes it's a deep zone, score some points, some breakaways and what have you, but might be something that they might be worried about going forward. But I thought it was a very solid performance by the Bay Packers this one, and probably upset the week in the Big Sky.
Yeah, time of possession as well, right? You got the Packers have got 42 minutes worth of possession there. The Titans only 18. I guess that kind of fits with that kind of deep strike offense type of philosophy, right? Which is I need to throw the ball once. If I throw it 72 yards, it's a touchdown, then I'm back on the board.
The thing that so you when you've got a 35-yard completion average, you're not going to have the ball for particularly long. What you do need to get up though is this 19% completion percentage. This is going to really struggle unless you can get this closer to 40-50%. as people make fun of me in the Delta, I like looking at the punt numbers, because sometimes when you see a small number of first downs and a significant number of points, it's because they're returning the ball on punts and kickoffs for having a much reduced field. But it doesn't look like, they're averaging for 20 yards on a punt return, which is going to take a couple of downs off.
Yeah, the problem I think here really for the Titans is, apart from obviously the fact that the deep zone wasn't really getting there with the low completion percentages, there's a lack of tandem there. The run offense and the pass offense aren't working very well together. So you've got this situation where you run a little bit and then you get incompletes and that ends the drive. It's always tricky if you're not playing short zone, and if you're not playing short passes, you can't really combine running and passing plays. You either just need to throw it for a first down immediately, or rush it several times. But if you're, it's very tricky in that situation to combine the two.
I don't agree with that, as the Mariners' performance this week in the Atlantic showed. You can run a long pass and a run, especially if you are having your running back average 5.9 yards a carry. But you need to be very careful with your play calling and how many runs and how many passes you've got in your set, short and long eights. And you really do need to play around with those eights as well.
Yeah, sure. I think you can, as you say, you can fix it. If you run on first down, you probably don't want to pass on second down. You want to just keep running once you've established it.
Yep. Yeah. Where else in this league?
So the next game I was looking at was the Glasgow Rushmores against the swarming giant Hornets. Most would expect the Hornets to win this one, but what stood out for me was actually, I believe it's their wide receiver of the Hornets racking up a massive 402 yards in this game, which takes some serious doing. I mean, that's an average of 21 yards per reception is quite the mean feat, that is.
I see there's some speculation there in the comments, given that the receiver is actually a running back. Who knows what exactly has happened there? Could this possibly be a bug going on?
It's a very odd one, and I couldn't say what was going on there, but
I wonder what plays this comes on. Let's have a look at the play-by-play.
Yeah, there's a comment in the comments saying that the running back receiver specialization kicked in multiple times, possibly up to 10 times there. Now, I'm no expert on some of those little clever coaching tricks, but it sounds possibly like that it might be triggering more often than it's intended to.
Quite possibly, yeah.
I mean, I ran something similar back in my original days in the A, of putting out 2 wide receivers that were about level 4. So all my passes went to my tight end.
Yeah, I remember those days.
I'm just going to target a single receiver. Let's have a look at.
If you have only one receiver who can actually really validly receive the ball, then the people are going to target him. He's got the technique.
He's a technique running back. He actually has
multiple attributes
good
that are suitable.
Sticky hands.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think he could just be a wide receiver playing in a running back number.
Yeah. It was impressive.
Very, very different. Lots of great attributes for receiving there for that guy. So yeah, maybe it's just they've stumbled upon a really niche, excellent player for that kind of skill set.
Yeah. Certainly worth keeping an eye on going forward as to what happens there. And then the only other game I sort of had a look at was the Port Royal Buccaneers and Coach Klein's team, finalists last season, and their running back who racked up over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns.
I mean, has this running back
from him?
Has this running back considered being a receiver instead? He could add he could add 101 yards on.
He could do. I mean, he got outdone this week for yardage for a running back. So unusually through receptions rather than actually running the ball. But another. It's a an impressive outing for the Buccaneers first week out, and all right, you could say it's the first week, and you'd expect them to win against a team that finished 5-5 last season, but you've still got to kick things off well, and I thought it was a really solid performance from the Buccaneers.
Okay, anything else in the B?
No, that's me wrapped up with the B this week.
Right, move on to the C. So one thing I noticed here that jumps out straight away, and I noticed it actually in the B as well, I forgot to comment, there's a lot of score lines with one team scoring 40 plus points, including one team scoring 64 points, which you don't see often in Gridiron, especially when it's to 10 as well. I don't think they've made any tune into the scoring. It could just be the way the schedules have fallen for these leagues, but it also could be a bit of level creep in how better the cream of the crop players are getting. As I'm seeing it more common to have a team of mid-teens players than when I was first in the Atlantic.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how popular nuclear rebuilds are in the Continental, but that's often a culprit for some of these very lopsided score lines, is when one team has said, look, I'm just going to trade out most of my starters, get ready for some big draft picks, throw in a team almost full of rookies, and then see how that rolls. So that can often lead to the real drubbings that you see. Another thing that can lead to it, of course, is just inactivity or excessive coach churn in a particular team, where, if you're in your fifth coach in 2 years, that can also leave you just in such a horrible mess that as soon as a halfway competent team comes along, you just get trounced.
Yeah, also you can find that some of the divisions, like towards the end of last season in the C, there's 2 teams that are good in the division and 2 teams with not so good records, and you tend to find that if you just happen to end up with those paired up for week 1 of the new season, the scores look maybe a little harsher than they would do it towards the end of a season, or if it was closer pairings.
I didn't have a chance to look into any of the games in this league in any details myself. Did anybody have a chance to look into any of the individual games?
One thing I did want to point out is the Arctic Badgers running back. So
haven't we previously given the Arctic Badgers an award for the best team name?
Should have done.
Possibly.
I think we did in the original original days.
Jason Race is still there. He must be one of the longest tenured Continental coaches by now.
So the one I liked is running back Strom, who has 5 touchdowns, 4 fumbles, and is age 9. Still racking up 7 yards a carry.
What a hero.
He's basically the Frank Gore of the GFLC.
Yeah, it's an absolute monster. He's someone I'm gonna follow for this season. His stats really popped when I was looking through some
fingers
of the
crossed.
numbers.
Fingers crossed he doesn't get injured in week 2.
Yeah,
due to his extreme age.
Yeah.
If he gets injured in week 2, I'm pretty sure Nick will give us updates each week of what his rehabilitation is.
StromWatch.
Will he get more fumbles or more touchdowns? Which will it be?
That's also a good race as well.
Oh.
That one just tickled me a little bit in the sea, so well worth mentioning. The only other thing that stood out, which was more of, I haven't looked into it, but it stood out just now, is the Angels Royals game. Angels 64 to the Royals 10. Now, last season the Royals were 3-7 and the Angels were 2-8. So I didn't expect the scoreline to be quite so large based on last season's finishing standings. And looking at the stats now, it also looks a bit of a quandary, that one.
Yeah, the stats don't make much sense here, do they? It's not a huge discrepancy in yardage or possession or turnovers.
Yeah, there is a comment in the comments post match suggesting that there may possibly have been another one of these nuclear rebuilds involved. But yeah, I agree that the yardage stats don't seem wildly out of whack, nor did the first downs. So clearly,
No.
when they got into scoring position, the problem was that the Royals just didn't do anything in scoring position.
Yeah.
Could it also be? I've seen this before, that a coach will have their field goal percentage set too high. So when they get inside the 20, because they've got their acceptable field goal percentage in the high 80s, 90s, they're punting from a field goal position instead.
Yeah, hopefully not. That
because
is always brutal.
None of these numbers. If I see a nuclear rebuild, I'd expect like the yardage to be massively skewed.
Yeah, the running back Hayes. Yeah, Hayes does all right there. Like that's quite respectable. As a stat line for a running back.
Punted.
13 times. Yeah, that's a lot.
And let's actually have a look at what yard lines they got to drive charts. Which team am I looking at?
Could also potentially be a special teams kind of thing, because
punt.
As you flicked past the punting, it looked like an average of 40 yards, a punt on one and 13 on the other.
I mean, it looks like they just didn't get into field goal range.
He did not really get outside of his own half of the field, did he? Much?
No. So maybe it's a rebuild and they just don't have a punter. And through not expecting to do well this season, why would you worry too much about getting a punter to some extent?
Yeah, 13-yard average punts is not a good place to be.
We've diagnosed it.
Yeah.
You need a punter. Everyone needs a punter.
To be fair, if they are in nuclear rebuild, getting 10 points and having some pretty reasonable stats, it's not a bad place to start, really.
Yeah, when I started my rebuild at the Redcoats, the first thing I did was just start heavily coaching my punter in the first couple of weeks because I knew I was going to be punting a lot in the first season.
Yeah.
Did you get rid of all traces of Renshaw in the team?
Oh, he was long gone. It was Timmermans in those days, the psychedelic Netherlands phase.
I mean, that was just that's just
Renshaw
Paul Renshaw's Dutch name. Yeah.
Straight translation.
Anything else in the C? Yes, C. I forgot what league we're in there for a second.
That's right. Let's move on to your league, Lee.
The Delta. Anybody wants an in-depth analysis of the Delta and they haven't watched it? The Meteor, I can highly recommend watching it. It goes into in-depth in every single game. Some things to point out from this particular week. Things went pretty much as you would expect in most of the games. Gonna call out my game with the Jets versus the Titans. This division is usually a 3-horse race. It's usually the Rogues, the Jets, and the Titans at the minute. The Massacre have been in a rebuild for a little bit. I don't know if this is just a game planning thing for Rod this week, but the Titans last season were a lot more competitive than this. They've got two monster running backs on their roster in McQueen and Crabtree. And last season, I could not stop them at all. I don't know if they've just aged badly or a game plan's gone down. Or game plan hasn't gone well. That's a big one to watch from this particular week. The other one that's always a little bit surprising is the Fury have a quality team every single year. The Sunblazers have a very good team as well. But Phil always seems to just squeak out wins. He rarely gets a blowout win, and he's consistently winning, so he's obviously doing something right. But an overtime win in a very much a rival game, which this division is probably on a knife edge, and whoever wins this division has a very good shot at the bowl. Apart from that, we can see the Metros have gone into a full nuclear rebuild mode. They traded out pretty much everything this season. A duck egg on the board against a divisional rival is going to hurt, especially in the biggest game in the GFL calendar. You've got Simon Sharp of the Metros versus Simon Wood of the Venom competing in what Simon Wood has dubbed the Simon Bowl.
All right.
So Simon Wood is now lifetime winning those. The Warriors are a team that got a lot of attention in the preseason with the trading they did. They had an excellent training camp. The Tokyo Chaos have been a team without anyone at the rudder for a season or two, only putting up 31 points against a rebuilding team. Could be some warning bells. It could be that Jonathan decided to rest a few players. I'm not sure which. And also Jeff Brown's Colts beating the Copperheads by such a convincing margin really does undersell how good the Copperheads are as a team, and I think makes Jeff's team look a little bit better than it is. Nick, Conrad, anything from yourselves on the D?
It sounds like a good excuse for a rant about nuclear rebuilds. I mean, I know people, I mentioned this in my interview in the Atlantic pre-week one. Most of the time they just don't work. So it does take a very skilled and organized coach to make a nuclear rebuild pan out properly, because what tends to happen is if you go hard on it and get a lot of draft picks in, you find your number of coaching targets is excessive, and you end up with a lot of cut bait after the first season of the rebuild. So it needs to be quite cleverly executed to kind of time your peak correctly and also not give yourself too many players to coach. So it is a real skill. Executing a rebuild is a real skill. I prefer never to really hard rebuild. I will normally just do what I would call soft rebuild, which is, start re-emphasizing the coaching towards the younger players and away from the older players, just to help you along in terms of keeping your team young. But yeah, I mean, enough respect. People have done it. The Goats have done it, for example. Have done a heroic nuclear rebuild back in the day in the GFL, but it's hard. And so watch how some of those go. If the Milngavie Metros are winning in 2 seasons, I'll eat my words.
Yeah, no, I read through your comments on that one, and I tend to agree. I've never nuclear rebuilt, even if if you look at my season stats, it looks like I did at one point. I got hit by bad aging, and if your nuclear rebuild gets hit by bad aging, well, you've got a real problem there. I agree with Conrad. Like if you're able to keep a few players knocking around, and not have to spread your CPs across 25, 30 players, or hope for the best sort of thing, then don't get me wrong, there are ways to do it. I think you're just better off long term to slowly, build areas of your team back up to full strength, and that way you don't have to worry quite so much. And you could, on top of that, you could, if you're nuclear rebuilding, you may well just lose interest in the game if you're losing 2, 3, 4 seasons in a row before your team gets somewhere. You might just find it's a real struggle to just get into games and want to play games, which, all right, it's not too bad if you coach 2 teams, but if it's your sole team, then yeah, it can be a little bit,
especially if you mortgage your future by trading out draft picks to get draft picks in or get younger players in, and you get one bad aging, you're probably extending your rebuild period by at least 2 seasons, if not more.
Yeah, I remember when I got hit with bad aging whilst not nuclear rebuilding, but rebuilding to some extent, and that hindered progress for maybe 5 seasons. And I won't lie, I disconnected a little bit with Gridiron during that time, because you can't win. All you're doing is coaching and hoping, putting your best team out there to get XP and what have you, and it does become a little bit of a struggle from that perspective.
Yeah,
then,
one of the things I like about the modern game is oh, sorry, I was just going to say about nowadays you can get the first win incentive. So one of the upsides is that at least even if you think you're not going to be competitive in a particular season, if you've got the possibility of the first win incentive, you can get quite a lot of extra CPs.
Yeah, that's a good point. And actually, to some extent, small rebuilds benefit more from that. You can rebuild small areas of your team and pick up those extra CPs, and that could actually put you in a better position going forward than full rebuild. That is, unless you find that you need to rebuild because the way your team's set up is just a way you're not going to enjoy playing Gridiron, which is potentially something that could happen as well.
I got a first win incentive with the Jets about 4 or 5 seasons ago. It was just after I traded out a couple of stud players I had because they were going to age out before I could coach up the rest of my team. So it's, as Conrad said, I got a soft rebuild, and I ended up with two very good draft picks and some other ones that were okay. And the first win incentive basically gave me 20 CPs a week to put on those 2 good draft picks. So it was much easier to coach them up. So it really softened the down and sped up the up just by doing a softer rebuild than it was to completely fire sale everything. And if I remember the trade board correctly, Simon Sharp was more or less saying, you tell me what players you want and give me any number of picks, and I'm just going to accept because they're going to get cut anyway.
All right, shall we talk Empire as our closer? And the poor old Empire being last, of course, in the alphabet.
Yes. Okay. Conrad, what do you think of the E?
It's not a league that I've ever really known a great deal about, to be fair. It's not one that I've ever really studied very much. If I'm looking at a league fresh and I open up a page and I say, which game do I want to watch? I will normally just say, I don't want to see the blowouts. Let's have a look at who had a close match. So how about the Sharks and the Thundering Herd with 3 points in it in a real shootout? That presumably will get you in some entertainment. We've got an overtime win. Everybody loves an overtime win. We've got about 1,000 passing yards racked up in there. Big shootout, like a big shootout. And the particular shout out to the Thundering Herd's quarterback, who managed to get 141 quarterback rating, which presumably is pretty close to perfect, right?
142 is perfect, I think. Or was it 146?
That's around there anyway. It's close enough, right?
It's very close, very, very close to perfect.
Meanwhile, the Sharks broke their record for number of completions.
Yeah, the Sharks were actually 46. I think it's 46-33 up with 7 minutes to play in this one as well. So I'm not saying they threw it away, but maybe they could have somehow held on towards the end of the game. A little bit unfortunate from that perspective. If you look at the number of first downs. You'd expect the Sharks to maybe have just squeaked it with given first downs and turnovers. But yeah, a real aerial battle, this one. One that was well worth watching.
Yeah, they must have been kicking themselves to throw the pick in the 58th minute and then find it's returned halfway back. And that's not a good place to be. I mean, I was almost as bad myself in that one of my players decided to start running down the clock, as they put it in the play-by-play. But unfortunately, it was a running back, and rather than just doing the old slide like you would do in real NFL, he just decided to go for it and fumbled. so much
Brilliant.
for running down the clock.
It's one way of running down on the clock, but the only thing I can say about this performance here is the Herd's quarterback really does know how to whiten the opposition.
We're just catching up there. Old
Terrible
Colgate.
puns. terrible puns. Nick, were there any other games that jumped out from the E?
I'm not sure there were too many other games that jumped out for me. You saw on the whole in the E, the teams you'd expect to win once again were winning. The Sharks Herd game was was one of the closer games. I'm not sure there are too many other games that were close. I mean, the Jacksonville High Hunters won fairly convincingly. The Russians won away from home. I thought the Lions would have put up a little bit of a better performance against the Russians, actually. 45-24. The Lions won their division last season, I believe. Although records were only one win apart. You'd maybe expected the Lions to pick this game, even if it was close. But it ended up not being particularly close, with a big second quarter from the Russians with 28 points.
A festival of turnovers as well, with 9 between the two teams.
Yeah. Yeah,
I will say that's one thing I like about the Empire, is that they've got some of the best franchise names. I mean, between the Russians and the Gamblers, I'm pretty jealous.
Isn't this the league that also used to have the supermodels in it?
Might be, yeah. That was one that was allowed to be changed.
Yeah, there's not many of those that have happened. I think there was one recently in the D where someone was allowed to change away from the name of the Redskins.
Well, as we know, the Washington football team is competing now. In fact, they haven't come up with a new name for them, have they?
No, and if they do to a fan vote, it's going to be Football McFootball Face or something. Incarnate Chaos is pretty good.
Funnily enough, I think they're not even the only Chaos, are they? Aren't there a Chaos in one of the other leagues?
Yes, there's the Tokyo Chaos in the D.
Speaking of it, that game's another, top two rivals games. Lots of points scored. The Bounty took that division last season by 1 win, and it looks like another close game, an interesting rivalry to keep an eye on going throughout the season. 10 points is easy to flip with home field advantage in the return leg.
I can definitely see a naming theme with the bounty as well.
Naming themes are great.
Hard to maintain these days, of course, because college players will mess them all up all the time.
Yeah.
I've given up with a naming theme for my teams, because about 50%, if not more, of the players I'm drafting in are coming with a name. So I've lost the ability to do that. Definitely remember the days of the Angels in the Sea, where my brother was coaching there. Every single player was named after a pope. There's been some really good themes that have come up, but yes, unfortunately the days of the 100% theme name teams, or pretty close to with trades, is a dying thing. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I don't really know.
You have to be a college coach if you want to have your own naming rights.
It's more of an Easter egg kind of thing now, isn't it? Because your top players are named sort of randomly compared to the rest of your team. Now everyone else can try and figure out what the rest of your team is named after. However, I seem to have ended up with 2 guards, and they're both called Chambers, so even I'm confused about that one.
Please say they're also the same QST and age.
No, they have different ages. They might be the same QST, but classic Chambers and Chambers squared.
Yeah. I hope one thing that we've succeeded in doing with PTI, and will hopefully continue to do so, is to convince people that maybe you can occasionally look outside your own league, because you'd be surprised at some of the entertainment that is available, even if it is only from StromWatch. But we'll, if you don't fancy it, we'll bring it back to you. So watch this space for more news from all over the leagues.
Also, if you have any sweet players like Strom that you want me to look out for, I'm more than happy to go and search up their stats, because it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
And you can get hold of Nick at stromwatch@gmail.com. No, that email address might exist for something else. It probably does. I would not email them yet.
Just post some bits in the comments if you think someone's worth looking at or looking out for. There's some sweet plays, and we're more than happy to take a look and keep an eye on things.
Yeah, definitely so. So just before we wrap up the recording, one of the other things we want to do with this as well is talk about some aspects of the rules. Anything you guys wanted to talk about, let us know. There's a few bits I can talk about. As it's the start of the season, I wanted to briefly talk about the coaching, the strategy when it comes to spending your CPs on coaching. Personally, I will tend to spend. I make sure that all of my first, second, third round picks get points. I will then try and get starters under age 5, and then I'll see what I've got left. And I will not spend less than 5 points on a player. I will also make sure that I'm coaching every single play in my set 8 as well to get the PCVs up. And for those that don't know, the reason I spend 5 points is if you spend 5 points on a player, or every multiple of 5 you spend, and they do not get a level increase, and you coach them in the same play the next week, you get a bonus point. So instead of spending 5, you then next week, you spend 5, you get 6 rolls. And that adds up over a season to nearly be a full week's extra worth of coaching I've worked out. Conrad, what's your approach when it comes to coaching players?
Yeah, I'm all about those 5s and 10s in terms of allocation of points. I would say that my basic philosophy on coaching is it depends on how I feel like the season's going. At the start of the season, I'll be pushing very much towards starters and thinking, who is my main team and, what can I do to improve my prospect of winning now? As the season wears on, if it looks like it's not going that great and it looks like either that I'm just not going to make the playoffs, which of course happens, or that I can't make much of a playoff run because the roster's not in great shape, I may just then start to deviate back in the ages, going down and going more towards the sort of age 0, 1, 2 players who I think have a pretty good chance of a decent aging role that can actually propel them a bit higher, and then sort of change the emphasis. So yeah, I'll start with starters, and then if it's not looking great by the midpoint of the season, there'll be more and more points going towards the young players. I'll also try and see if I can get some stuff into the development squad players. Because I'm always living the dream and hoping that I can change their QSTs and suddenly turn a 6th round pick into a viable starter.
Nick?
The key to coaching is being very lucky. That's it. Just lucky. No.
I mean,
I've done very. It is true. Yeah, be lucky. I've tried various ways to coach over the years, and actually this season is a little bit different for me. I don't have a development squad this season, so I don't have to worry about trying to get pops into them because they are going to sit on your roster next season if they don't coach well. I do try and do multiples of 5. Tend to end up early on in the season only doing 5s, and then once we hit sort of weeks 5 and 6, I'll review that, and if there's a player I want to get more pops into, then I'll bump them up to 10. I do sometimes use a bit of a scattergun approach at the bottom end. If you have a fair few players that could work out well for you from rounds 6, 7, and 8, putting 2 CPs on 5 different players, it might make if a couple of them get some good pops early on, then when you come to review it halfway through the season, then the ones that don't do so well, you can take their CPs away and start putting 5s on the ones that have done well. This is something I try every so often, something a bit different, and pretty much mirror what the other guys said. Make sure you're coaching on the plays that you want to be coaching on. In both offense and defense, and sometimes it is worth noting if you don't know already is I think it's 5 CPs you can switch between offense and defense, and sometimes that can make the difference. If if your offense doesn't need much work but your defense does, then the extra 5 CPs on another player might make a difference there.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll add as well is don't forget about staff. And don't overpay for staff as well. It's good to have it's better to have a level 2 bad MIA staffer than not have a staffer at all. I like to think I've got a very good handle on staffing. Whenever I've looked at the cost per level or the cost per MIA that are spending on staff, I tend to come out top in most of the leagues I'm in. You don't have to have all level 10 coaches. You've got the head coach oversight as well. There might be some player positions you're not actually coaching many players in that position, so the coach doesn't have as big an effect, but it can make a significant change to the percentage chance for that player to level. So make sure you're coaching, make sure that you're building your coaches up. And if it gets later in the season and you're not coaching a particular position, think about moving a coach around that has an MIA suited to a better position to get the efficiency up on that coach as well, as the efficiency is quite big. It builds up at 10% per week as well for all coaches, except for the development assistant and the motivation coach, where it's a different formula. But all of your positional coaches, don't be afraid, and definitely get in poaching offers for coaches that are underpaying coaches as well, which don't open until later in the season, but it's a good thing to think about now.
Yeah, one of the other things, sort of as you mentioned, with switching coaches around, is one of the easier ones to switch around is obviously wide receiver and running back coaches, because you're essentially using the same stats. So if you are short in an area, and that tends, if that happens to be the area and you need to switch it around, then feel free to do so, because that can be very helpful.
Yeah,
I am one of the worst people remembering to pick up coaches in the off season though, so
this is what led to the greatest player to ever play for the Redcoats in the Atlantic, my team, of course. The greatest player to ever play for them became a coach. He was a running back. He had an amazing career as a running back. He became a coach. He started coaching wide receivers because that's the same MIA, and he's been coaching wide receivers ever since.
Burrows?
Carr.
Oh, Carr.
He's a Timmermans product, but yeah, played about 10 seasons for the Redcoats. Is definitely the best player they had.
Has he taken any trips over to the Big Sky at any point in time? You know, met up at the odd wide receiver / running back that happens.
Maybe that's the secret mentoring relationship.
I mean, in the defense of that, technically a pitch is a lateral backward pass, so technically they are receiving yards.
Yeah.
Right. Has anybody got anything else before we call this a close?
I think we've given everyone enough food for thought for now.
Okay. Until next time, anything you want us to talk about, please put it in the comments, either directly on the site, or I think I turned on YouTube comments now, so you can leave them there. My name's Lee. We have Nick. We have Conrad. Cheers all.
Happy Easter.
See ya. Good luck.